We're just going to go live. 2, 3, 4.
You're listening to the number one source for political, pop culture, and sports talk on the radio. The Julio Rivera Show. Hashtag Conservarican. With no fuck left to give.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Hit it!
We are controlling transmission.
Ladies and gentlemen,
The Julio Rivera Show is on.
And popping as always. It looks like you got what you wanted. You got just me for right now. As advertised, we're supposed to have Curtis Ellis on, and we haven't been able to make that happen yet, and we're hoping that that'll come through shortly. But in the interim, let me take over the mic for just a moment and talk about a couple of things that are on my mind on this Thursday, September 8th, 2016, the Julio Rivera Show, hashtag Conservarican on the Lanterns Radio Network, which you can see at www.lanterns.buzz, lanterns.buzz. There's not a com in there because we're not bringing calm. We're bringing hysteria this evening. The one thing I want to talk about is 60 days out, we're still having this ideological disconnect. People have lost their minds. We are 2 months out of the most important, and I will say this, they always say this, the most important election in history. Everyone is the most important in history. No. They all are progressively, as the progressive machine grows larger. We're at a particular tipping point due to a couple of I think very obvious aspects right here. We have lawlessness. We have a lack of transparency. The lack of transparency gives people a false sense of security of the state of the country. When you have a Democratic leadership that's been around for 7.5 years, has driven down the unemployment, the actual percentage of people working is at about 62, 63%, where under Bush it was never less than the 66 range. I forget what the name of the stat is right now off the top of my head because I really expected to have a guess right now. But the actual 95 million people not working, not counting people off of the rolls after they stop receiving unemployment benefits. And they're reporting the number as 5% unemployment. That is a lie. $19 trillion is not a lie, however. And neither are the 100 million in unfunded liabilities. Things like baseline budgeting, the government pork barrel spending machine, the cronyism. Whatever's going down there at K Street, somebody is getting paid and the American people are getting shafted. And that's what ultimately this election is about. How do you break that machine? Does this administration under Donald Trump break the machine? No administration can totally break the machine when the players that are actually writing out these bills and whatnot, in order to advance legislature, you're going to have some element of that pay-to-play, that cronyism somewhere in there. You don't fix it in one fell swoop. You can't sit there and veto every bill that they throw at you. It's a game of compromise. And I hate to use that word because I feel as American people, as shafted as we are, we shouldn't have to. But that's what happens when you have a populace that has sat there, fell asleep, and let the centralized federal government take so much power, marginalizing states, marginalizing the individual, weakening anyone that tries to come up because the more you make, the more they take. You never get that sovereign power. One of the questions that I hope to get a chance to ask Mr. Ellis was specific plans for the Donald Trump administration. And this is something I've been thinking about in particular over the last couple of weeks and actually the last couple of months, ever since it's been him. I like some of the things that I've heard pitched. I think that his DNA is that he believes in capitalism. You can argue that he's been on, a couple of different sides of some issues. But I think one thing that he's always stayed true to is that just like anybody that's in business, you want to get away with paying as little tax as possible. The only way you could really do it in our, big government entitlement society that we've grown into now as an economy is really, you have to make it easier for businesses to be able to make money, for people to get things off of the ground. That comes with tax reform, it comes with deregulation, and a key element of that is entitlement reform. There are far too many people receiving subsidies in this country. And there's really no excuse for it. The opportunity train is also being drained about something that I've been talking about at length. Absolutely at length over the last couple of episodes, which is immigration. I still want to see the carved out final plan for any of this stuff. Will we see it? Before Election Day, articulated, clearly, signed, double signed, triple signed? Will that be good enough for some people? Will the never-Trumpers say, yeah, you know what, that sounds great, that's a great plan, that's the best plan I've ever heard. But is he going to stick to it? Are we still going to be fighting that fight in November? Are people just looking past the opposition? Or have we become our own opposition? Think about that. The Republican Party is splintered. It's broken. The media has played us out to be these caricatures, and Trump has given them every bit of ammo they've needed. They've spun some things that have been perfectly reasonable to me. The statements that he's made regarding the refugee resettlement. That is not in the least xenophobic. It is not in the least racist. You're talking about an ideology, you're talking about an idea that some sick, radicalized people in our world have that's bringing death and destruction. And we're seeing it in Europe, where the refugee resettlement was obviously more sudden. We've seen elements of domestic terrorism here as well. Do you want to take the risk of bringing in 550% more refugees than we've already committed to taking? When Jim Comey, that same Jim Comey, certainly not my homie, as he's basically said, he gave the ultimate pass actually to Hillary Clinton. And we're not here to talk about Jim Comey, but said himself, we cannot vet these people. We are the intelligence agencies of the United States of America, and we object to the idea of bringing in these Syrians, these displaced individuals from the Middle East, where ISIS has taken command of a caliphate at this point has to be much, much larger than Indiana. That was the last frame of reference I had. But that was from about a year ago they were that big. So imagine now. You got presidential candidates that don't even know where places are. The world is in trouble. The best that America can come up with, and it's a pretty damn good one, I think, and it's the only choice that we can make. And you guys have been killing me, and I don't think I've ever actually had the microphone open like this for a while to readdress, the issue of how people have been taking this entire Cruz Trump thing and the never Trump thing. This is stupid. It's stupid. Please. And I was like, I say it in nice ways. I try to be reasonable. I try to be understanding to people's concerns. But at a certain point, you got to stop lying to yourself. Hillary Clinton is not Donald Trump, or vice versa. Senator Cruz was certainly not Donald Trump, but they're on the same side of the hemisphere, you know, when you look at it. They're both, even if Donald Trump, if you want to call him a centrist or you want to call him a moderate, that's still a lot better than you're going to get with Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton, who said in a speech 2 years ago, don't let anyone ever tell you that the private sector creates jobs. They're going to force these numbers down our throat. 5% unemployment. And actually, one of the things, and I'm going to go to this because I was going to go to this with Mr. Ellis, but he's not here, was the jobs report. We're not creating jobs in this country. The U.S. manufacturing sector remains stagnant. This is a quote from Curtis Ellis. Since Clinton's NAFTA and China trade policies went into effect, the U.S. has lost over 4.5 million, with a M, manufacturing jobs. Think about that for a minute. Manufacturing jobs. You're talking manufacturers, you're talking warehouses, you're talking factories, you're talking back-end administrative work. If you've got 4.5 million people doing actual manufacturing work, you still have to have the transportation support to send all those products around. You've got the fuel cost associated with that. So much revenue is being lost to these huge trade deals. And these trade deals do not benefit the United States of America. I understand it's a world economy, but why can't we have an economically, and people are going to say it's a fascism. No, it's not fascism. It's smart domestic economic policy that creates jobs and allows Americans, ourselves, to enjoy the fruits of our labor at better prices. That marginalizes. You're not going to be fascist because you're going to have a marginalized, centralized federal government. The way to create those domestic policies is to marginalize the federal government. The unelected bureaucrats telling us what we can do and what we can't do and how we can do it, and giving us permission and telling us when we can take our piss break. We got to get rid of all that. The states have to be able to decide what they want to do with their land. Do away with the EPA. And as Senator Cruz used to like to say, the alphabet soup of unnecessary government bureaucracy. We know what we have to do. The answers are simple. It takes political will to do so. Every day, and people sit there and they tie, oh, Trump has money invested in banks, and he has this, and there's hedge funds that are investing in some of his properties that are owned by this one or that one. And you know what? At the end of the day, when you've got big money like that, that's the way that money moves around. And sometimes when you got big money like that, there's going to be people that you're going to be moving it around with, you know, as a byproduct, I guess if you want to call it the shrapnel, the collateral damage, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're in bed with those people ideologically, politically, or even in any way. I mean, there's just a lot of people that involve, you know, if you could say, oh, well, a major investor in Apple is George Soros, and another person that has a major investment in Apple is, and I'm not saying that this for a fact. I have no idea what George Soros owns or what anybody owns. I'm not looking at their portfolios right now. I'm just saying, if people have money together in certain either hedge funds or certain things, you know, it doesn't necessarily indicate a connection between those people. You know, I think Donald Trump is willing to tell people to bug off in a sense, and he might do it in the wrong situations, and he's done it, you know, where he's pissed off a lot of ideologues because of his treatment of some of the candidates. But they're candidates in an election. You know? I could have sat here and been as butthurt or as more butthurt than any Cruz supporter. Because it was a major part of what I was trying to do for like a long time. I was so invested into trying to just get the good word out. And I've said this before, the only time in my life that I ever felt I was doing exactly what God wanted me to do was when I was supporting him. Because I know he's a good man, you know. And I know the way the world works, and the world is, there's a big shark tank, and there's sharks swimming, and it's a hard road to hold, and people do what they have to do, and it's crazy. And when you're in business and you're trying to employ people and whatever, like, people generally boils down to, you sit down with your lawyer and you talk about what can I get away with here. That's the way people do business. How can I maximize my profits? How can I pay my employees more? How can I take care of my team the best? It's not necessarily a bad thing. You're operating within the confines of whatever the rules may be. People want to demonize capitalism. Capitalism is not the problem. It's the only solution we have left. And the only way to capitalism, honestly, is to marginalize the power of the government. Some people are willing to do that. Some people aren't. And it's because of that aforementioned political will. Politicians are bought and sold. Donald Trump has talked about that. He's bought many. I was looking at a chart, and I have no idea what the accuracy of it, but with the supposed footnote, and I didn't have time to check the footnote because I barely had time to do anything today, on show day. Big show day. It showed the percentage of where he was giving his money to, and there's a more pronounced than ever slant towards giving money to Republicans and conservative candidates for Mr. Trump since 2011 versus more of an even plane in the earlier years that can be confirmed as far as who he gave what to, you know. Gave $5,000 to Ted Cruz. That counts for something, doesn't it? It's a lot more than I gave Ted Cruz. I gave to, actually, if you think you count effort and stuff like that, it depends on what you want to say. I didn't really bill him per hour, but you know, it was a lot, you know, during that time. Time, travel, all of that. But let's get away from that for a second. We have 2 months here to either get ourselves in a position where in January we're going to have a Republican president. And I hope that the down ticket works with him so we can get things done. And one point that I want to start actually begin stressing is Donald Trump does not have the ground game. They did not form the ground game. They're relying on polling to tell them how much money they need to spend at any given time. And because he's doing well, he's been able to maintain a lean and mean campaign structure that's still, you know, I mean, per the last CNN poll, he's up 2 points. So that's, you know, he's definitely, you know, on top. There's still margin of error probably within that poll. So nothing is guaranteed, and nothing is guaranteed from a stupid poll anyway. I mean, I don't believe those things as far as I can throw them. I mean, I don't understand how we can take 1,000 people and that accounts for what the country is going to do. I still don't get that. One thing I think that Trump needs to do, since he has, you know, such a small team, I think he needs to reach out to the state GOPs, all of them. He needs to bring in whoever's in charge, all the higher ups, and talk to the people with influence there that are running, and start running a dual campaign, a vote up and down ticket movement. But you gotta have all the other people that are running want to brand with you and not run away from you. You know, it's really about one section, and it's the conservatives. The conservative people that are running need to put their all that aside, And they need to team up with Trump here. And even the moderates, like Paul Ryan. In Paul Ryan's district, they need to be pushing Trump. Big time. Print the posters yourself. Because you know what? It's sure as hell, if you don't win up ticket, you're probably going to lose down ticket. That's really the way it's going to be. The people that really come out are going to come out and they're going to vote that way. I don't think that there's enough principled, never Trump conservatives to save the Senate and just live with Hillary Clinton. It's not going to work that way. If Hillary Clinton wins, I believe the Senate will flip. There's going to be a lot of people that just go in there and vote against Trump. Because there's two different types of never Trumpers. There's conservative never Trumpers, and then there's we hate that racist Trump, xenophobe, blah blah, and that's BS. I mean, obviously, I'm not saying it like it's something that we advocate or believe, but there's those never Trumpers, and then there's the never Trumpers that wanted Ted Cruz to win or something. Apparently, constitutional conservative types, which I'm one of them. You know who else is? Mark Levin. I can talk about that for a minute. That was shocking to me in particular. But not. The reception to it is kind of shocking. That people are like, wow, I can't believe he said that. But in a way, I can't believe that he didn't say it sooner. I jumped on the Trump train when they were still hammering out the Rules Committee, and there were stories out saying that Mike Lee had a majority and an advantage to go ahead and make something happen. I honestly, at that point, had a crisis of conscience that I don't think it's necessarily right to take something from someone, and we just keep demonizing him and demonizing him and demonizing him, and who are we really to judge? I believe that as conservatives, if we believe in God, that we have to understand that there's a certain element of we have no control over it. So if this is God's will, you don't know how he's going to go. And I mean, he's got, like I said, he's got a lot of conservative DNA. I don't like hearing some of the things he says sometimes. I'm going to put Ivanka as would make a great on a cabinet. Really? Which department exactly? You know what I mean? Like certain things like that kind of sometimes worry me about Trump. Like I think he needs to be more of a conventional Republican to win. If he starts really naming like, oh, Alan West is going to be my, my Secretary of Defense. Ted Cruz or probably not Ted Cruz, but Marco Rubio is going to be like my Secretary of State. Somebody who's spoken out against communism and is incensed over the fact that we raised the sanctions in Cuba with with them not making any concessions. If he starts talking like that, then you see it. Then you're like, oh yeah, there's still us, but it's maybe not the guy that we wanted at the top of the ticket. I still say, and I always say as a conservative, because I believe our votes count the most, that as the conservatives vote is the way that the country is decided. I really, truly, 150%, with every fiber of my being, believe that. Because I think Mitt Romney would have voted or would have won if we would have had more conservative votes. I mean, I just think it's easy to see it that way. And what's going to happen? Scary stuff. Well, we were supposed to have Curtis Ellis, but I don't know, something got lost in translation. And sometimes when you're speaking to El Conservarican, I don't know, if I switch to Spanish, you might not understand what I'm saying. But getting past that, we're going to have pretty soon a guy that's very interesting. This guy's going to talk about something, and I want all the parents listening to really pay attention to this gentleman. Really give your just all your attention to this right here, because this is going to be something very interesting. His name is Joe Gooding, host of he's PARaven.net. It's a medical news blog. It's a lot of interesting stuff regarding immunizations, trampling of our civil liberties, the federal government telling us what we have to do with our bodies. And as we return to school, it's a very relevant issue. And I think anytime the government is trying to tell us to do something that we may not want to do, force us to do things against our will, it is a big story. So we will return shortly with Mr. Joe Gooding. Don't go anywhere.
You're listening to the number one source for political, pop culture, and sports talk on the radio. The Julio Rivera Show. Hashtag Conservarican. With no fuck left to give.
Hi, I'm Adam Marr, Apache helicopter pilot and COO of the Warrior Angels Foundation, a 501c3 with a superior treatment for our veterans suffering with TBI and PTS. We have found a solution that pinpoints and treats the underlying condition and are providing that solution for veterans across the nation, but we need your help. Go to waftbi.org to find out more. That's waftbi.org.
Find the Lanterns Radio Network on Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, iTunes.
They can intercept this transmission at any time, so I'll be brief. The fight is here. The time is now. Go behind enemy lines.
Player FM, YouTube, and other social media by searching keyword Lanterns Buzz or Lanterns Radio Network.
Politics got you down? Is your team in last place? Is your significant other sleeping with your neighbor? Well, cheer up. The Julio Rivera Show is on. Deal with your problems afterwards.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, hit it!
We are controlling transmission.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Julio Rivera Show is on.
And popping on this Thursday, what am I talking about? On this Thursday, September 8th, 2016. I'm just a little off right now. I didn't expect to have to go run there for like a half an hour. I'm a little out of breath. I feel like I just ran a marathon because my mouth never stops. And yes, and I'm here with Joe Gooding. I want you to tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what it is that you are an advocate for, because we had a conversation the other day that I found extremely interesting, and I think everybody needs to be made aware of things that are going on like that, because they may not think about it, or they may think it's such a societal norm that they don't realize, any intrusiveness from the federal government on this issue. But why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about what you're about?
Certainly. I run what I call the PARaven.net medical blog, and I blog about various things in medicine, but mainly about vaccination mandates and government intrusion in your personal medical decisions. I believe that people have the right to make their own decisions, self-determination, and determine for themselves how to secure their health of their children.
Exactly, and we've had instances, unfortunately, with, and it's a sad thing. We've been linking, to getting vaccinations to certain kids. I mean, you're basically plugging a kid full of a disease, and you don't know exactly how that person's body is going to react to something. The immunization, I guess the theory of doing that to people isn't always an exact science, and sometimes people can get hurt from it. I mean, some people would argue that it does far more good than bad. But if you figure, you're not in an area where there may be an outbreak, you should at least have the right to decide whether or not you want to do that for yourself, correct?
I agree. That is correct. Ultimately, it comes down to the parents deciding what's right for their children and informed consent. When government can dictate what's injected in your body and what terms it's injected into by a mandate, there's little else left to liberty over your own body.
And what is the historically, I don't know if this is something you can answer, but going back, like, how did this all start with mandates on this kind of stuff?
It started, I believe it was 1905, with a decision called Jacobson versus Massachusetts. The Supreme Court ruled that vaccines could be mandated in the event of an epidemic. From there, it expanded to other court decisions that mandated vaccines for school attendance and such as that. It's basically an intrusion upon your personal liberty.
It most certainly is, in the most personal of ways, because you should have a right to decide what goes into your body and what doesn't, and we've seen a lot of, cronyism. And it's funny, too, because if you were listening to the show as it started, we were supposed to be talking economics on there, so I kind of had to carry it for a half an hour. But one of the things that I brought up is cronyism. And there's a lot of cronyism in the pharmaceutical business. You saw a big donation to the Clinton Foundation from someone who just raised, I believe it was the price of EpiPens, correct? It went up a ridiculous percentage as far as price wise. And that's something that you may, like, let's say you're allergic, and this goes back to the schools issue, right? If you have an allergy, the schools will mandate a kid that has an allergy perhaps to have to purchase that new, $300-400 EpiPen, or they won't let them in just in case something happens.
That's correct. When government mandates medical procedures on you, you lose all choice in the matter. You don't have a choice. You don't know what vaccine is going to cause to your particular child, and parents have to ultimately retain the right to decline those without penalty. Otherwise, there's no informed consent. There's no choice in the matter. Once it's mandated, it's mandated. And whether you vaccinate your children or not, passing a mandate law takes away any possibility of choice. It takes away any right. It's the most basic violation of human rights.
Yeah, and as a liberty lover like yourself, I mean, it's at the purest. How do you feel about our society nowadays? With we obviously with Obamacare, there's a mandate that you have to purchase it. And there's things like this in the government. As far as people's personal health care, what's your position actually on Obamacare, and what do you think the effect of these mandates, both for employers and personal, has had on the country?
I think those two issues dovetail together. If the government can mandate you to purchase insurance or control that, and they can mandate you to vaccinate your children, there's no limit to what they can make you do as a condition of citizenship. They say that you need to vaccinate your children in order to attend school. They've expanded that into the workplace, where now you need to vaccinate in order to obtain employment. So I'm opposed to government mandates across the board, especially in your health care and your vaccination decisions.
Well, let me ask you another question, right? Colleges are private institutions. If a college wants to mandate a vaccination before they let somebody in, and it's outside of, let's say it's a private university that accepts no money from the government, is that okay in your view?
I think anything that forces a medical decision on somebody without choice, especially when there's a risk to it, vaccines aren't entirely safe for everybody, and they're not entirely effective. When government or private institutions mandate a medical procedure or a practice with a risk, somebody's going to be harmed by it. So I would be opposed to a strict mandate that doesn't respect individual liberty rights. When you talk about mandating vaccination against personal belief or religious faith, you're basically shredding the First Amendment.
In a sense, yeah, you're right. Mm-hmm.
You're taking away the right of the person to determine to themselves if that product is right for them, if the way it's developed is right for them, and if there's ingredients in the vaccine that they would be morally objecting to. You're just tossing their First Amendment rights out the window.
Okay, but let me flip that around then. But a private institution then is an at-will institution. So you don't have to go to that college if you don't want to. So if that being one of the protocols, so do you really feel that it's wrong in the scope of, in private institutions the way that it is in public institutions?
Not necessarily, because you can choose to go to a different college or not. You can make those decisions as long as it's a free choice of the parent. Now, when you think of college vaccination requirements, those are almost an extension of Obamacare and the government. The government sets goals for vaccination requirements, and those goals apply across the board. Now, if a college is being used as an instrument to attain a goal, then I would be opposed to that. But if it's a free choice a parent makes, I would not be opposed to that. Now,
let me ask you a question, since this is something that you follow. Where has this at all been challenged legally recently? And is there anything on the horizon as far as an important cases or maybe somewhere where this is a hot button issue currently in the country?
Yeah, it's a hot button issue all over the country. I guess the most commonly known case would be out in California regarding SB 277. The legislature there passed a mandatory vaccination bill where there's 10 vaccines the child has to have or they get excluded from school. They took away the personal belief exemption and the religious exemption to vaccination in those states. Those parents have no choice in the matter. That's being challenged in court right now, in federal court and in state court in California. And further, there's several states that are thinking of passing mandatory vaccination laws. One is Virginia. They're trying to strip the religious exemption out of Virginia law. So it is a hot button, and it's contested all over the country.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I think that the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the most important amendments, the bottom half of the Bill of Rights is under, really under attack now, as powerful as the progressive have become. And that's actually very, very scary in a sense, because, if at that point, if they take your ability away to worship freely, and that's really what it is, because let's say if you're, what are they, Christian Scientists? They don't like to take any kind of medicine?
Yeah, the Christian Scientists are generally opposed to it, but it's important to remember that the constitutional right to religious liberty is an individual right. It's not, there's no requirement for an organized faith to validate your belief, meaning it's strictly an individual right. Some people oppose the vaccine for religious reasons because of the ingredients or the way they're manufactured. For instance, many vaccines today are developed and manufactured using aborted fetal cell lines, and that violates the concept of people of faith. And the position of the state is that you can't exempt out from that. That's a general law requirement. I would be strongly opposed to that because I think it violates people's religious conscience.
Yeah, it most certainly does. I mean, the strongest pro-life among us wouldn't want to see that happen. And that's really what it boils down to, that we right now progressives only care about the government mandate, and it's only about pushing us to more of a statist society, and I think it has to do with the fact that the government knows that they can make money off of all this stuff. I think if you eliminate the cronyism aspect of it, if there wasn't an interest in DC to make money off of these vaccines, once something is a product and it generates revenue, the government will find a way to tax it, regulate it, all these things, and obviously a way to profit off of it. And the powers that be, the people that actually make these decisions, are the ones that pull the strings, and they're the ones that get the kickbacks. I mean, unfortunately, we have to realize that that's what we're dealing with here. Now, as far as the president, let's shift the gears a little bit, because one of the things that I noticed when I met you the other day, and you pulled up in your truck, is that you had a Trump bumper sticker on the back seat.
Yes, sir, I do.
Yes, so you're a Trump guy. In terms of the actual election and what's going on right now, besides, your cause, which is a very important cause, the cause of liberty is one that must be fought vigilantly on a daily basis. What are your other bigger issues that you're concerned with coming up in this national election?
The biggest issues I have aside from the, the right to make their own decisions medically, would be government mandate and intrusion in family life, excessive taxation. Another issue would be national security. And those are my primary considerations.
Okay, national security. I'm sorry. No, I just wanted to just jump on one of them one at a time, right? All right, the taxation issue, right? First of all, Donald Trump has a 3-bracket tax plan. This simplifies the tax code. And he also had a corporate tax dropping all the way to 15% as per the last disclosure as far as when he had that speech. So that one is pretty much covered. And then, and you were saying national security, national defense.
That's correct.
All right. Rebuilding the military, in a sense, becomes almost like a jobs program. I think that the military, we need to bring and restore pride back into our military so that people want to join the military. And not just join the military because they have to join the military, but join the military because they want to join the military. There's no sense of patriotism anymore in our country. I mean, how much has it changed just in the last 7.5 years with this new generation of college students and millennials?
Well, it's evident just watching the news. When you hear terms like microaggression, things like that, you can tell there's a definite societal shift in the last 8 years. But I would want to focus, if I had my way, I'd want to focus on getting back to the core responsibilities of government. To protect and defend the homeland, to provide for the national defense, that type of thing.
Yeah, the original words, the way that the documents were written, were very basic because you know what? The functions of the federal government should be very basic. If it's outside that original 10, First Amendment, or 10 amendments rather, everything else, is written as far as the way that the federal government is going to work and in relation to the states, and whatever's not implicitly decided by the Constitution is going to be deferred to the states. But it just seems like every time a federal bureaucracy is created, the federal government gets a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more power and a little more intrusiveness into the way that people's day lives are ran.
That's correct. I believe that firmly. And as far as government intrusion goes, they need to stick to just what the government is intended for and keep their nose out of people's personal medical decisions. That area is not prescribed to the federal government. It's prescribed to the states or the people. Exactly,
in the most personal of things. Let me ask you, what party do you actually associate? Because you sound like you could be a libertarian or you sound like you could be a constitutional conservative. Where do you actually fall on the ideological spectrum?
I would call myself a conservatarian by trade. I'm conservative politically, and I'm socially libertarian.
Okay, yeah, and that actually kind of fall into that. Now, we have a guy in the race, Gary Johnson, who a lot of conservatives argue leans far to the left, too much far to the left for him to be an actual candidate for them if they wanted a third party option. And the Libertarian Party is kind of in flux a little bit right now. Although Gary Johnson is doing good in the polls, what's your personal take on Gary Johnson?
My personal take on Gary Johnson would be, if you can't support and defend the rights of the unborn child and the rights of parents to make their own medical decisions, I can't support you.
So that's your main number one issue. Like, what would you negotiate on that? Not on that issue, but would you negotiate on something else like taxation or deregulatory, measures to free up the free market to protect the medical decision one? Is that like the number one?
I wouldn't negotiate on bedrock human rights issues. I believe forced medical procedures violate basic human rights, and I couldn't do that. And getting back to what I discussed earlier about the development of vaccines, a lot of people don't realize that the hepatitis A and B, chickenpox, every version of the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, the smallpox vaccine, the polio vaccine, the shingles vaccine, they're all derived from aborted fetal cells. And DNA vaccine. the trend is going away from the old way of developing vaccines, and they're using ingredients and methods to violate people's conscience. And to mandate that against your religious liberty is unconscionable to me. I couldn't tolerate it.
Wow.
That's just where I'm coming from. The Gardasil vaccine is a new DNA vaccine. You should research carefully on that one before you get it.
And what are those called again, so people who are listening could look into it more? Because they don't even know. People go to the doctor sometimes and they don't ask the proper questions. So what should people really be on the lookout or concerned for?
What they should really be on the lookout and concerned for is they're not put under undue pressure to vaccinate their children. They should always, always ask the doctor to give them what's called the package insert. When you go to the doctor and you vaccinate, they give you what's called a vaccine information sheet. That vaccine information sheet is very skim and very bare on information. It doesn't go into full details of risk versus benefit. Parents should always, always ask for a package insert before they do it. And read up on it and then make your own informed decision.
That's true. That's the only thing you can ask somebody to do, is to take the personal responsibility to go ahead and ask the question. We're all responsible for what we put in our bodies ultimately. So, whether or not we refuse it, as long as you're not being made to believe that you have to have it, or you have a government in your face telling you that you have to have it. And that's actually what we have to get away from, I think ultimately. And you're absolutely right. I think it's an important issue. I'm so glad to have you on. I'd love to have you on again. Why don't you tell everyone where they could reach you and, your blog again and like your Twitter and everything, so people can look you up?
Sure. You can reach me at, I'll spell it P-A-R-A-V-E-N, PARaven.net. I'm on Twitter at Joe Gooding, Joegooding, and Facebook under the same name. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of information on there on that blog about individual liberty. Each vaccine is broken down so that parents can make their own decision, free of government influence and free of coercion. I vaccinated my children. I didn't require the government to tell me to do it or make me to do it. And most parents are the same way. And if we don't protect that right, it'll go away, and the next thing to be taken away will concern you a lot more.
Wow, and that's Joe Gooding, and again, look at it on Twitter at JoeGooding, just the way it sounds. Thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to having you on again in the future, sir.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. It's been a delight to speak to you, and thank you for giving me the platform to speak.
No problem, anytime. And that was Joe Gooding again. And that's our Thursday show. The Julio Rivera Show, #Conservarican. We'll be back next week. Hopefully, we'll get Mr. Curtis Ellis on, because I have a lot of questions to ask economically. If you listen to the first half hour of the show, rewind it, and remember those, and we'll try to find questions for Mr. Ellis when we eventually have him on. Thank you so much for joining me. That is all for this Thursday.